Imagine walking through streets where ancient Silk Road caravans once traded treasures from across Asia, where towering mountains frame a city that has witnessed over 3,500 years of human civilization. Now picture that same place transformed by decades of conflict, yet still pulsing with life, culture, and stories that few outsiders ever hear. This is Kabul in 2026, and what you're about to discover will challenge everything you thought you knew about Afghanistan. In a world that often sees this country through the narrow lens of news headlines, there exists a rich tapestry of traditions, beauty, and resilience that remains hidden from most eyes. What is it really like to live in one of the world's most misunderstood capitals? How do people maintain their cultural identity amid constant change? And what secrets lie within the daily lives of Kabul's residents that the outside world rarely gets to see? The story of Kabul is not just about a city, it's about a crossroads of civilizations where Persian, Central Asian, and South Asian cultures have blended for millennia. It's about women whose lives are far more complex than any single narrative can capture. About customs that date back centuries yet continue to shape modern life. And about a people who have survived empires, invasions, and internal struggles while holding on to traditions that define their identity. Have you ever wondered what lies beyond the images you see on television? What does a typical day look like for families in Kabul? How do ancient traditions coexist with the realities of the 21st century? As we journey through this documentary, you'll discover aspects of Afghan culture that will surprise you. From the intricate social codes that govern daily interactions to the stunning craftsmanship that adorns homes and clothing. From the aromatic dishes that have been perfected over generations to the poetry that flows through the city's veins like blood. But perhaps most fascinating of all is how Kabul's residents navigate their world, how they celebrate, how they grieve, how they love, and how they maintain dignity in circumstances that would break many others. The women of Kabul carry stories that deserve to be heard beyond stereotypes and simplified narratives. Their strength, intelligence, and contributions to their families and communities reveal a reality far more nuanced than what reaches international headlines. What role do they truly play in Afghan society? How do they preserve their identity while adapting to ever-changing circumstances? These questions will be answered as we delve deeper into the heart of this ancient city. Before we continue this fascinating journey through one of the world's most historic and misunderstood places, I invite you to subscribe and activate the notification bell so you don't miss our documentaries exploring unique cultures and places around the globe. From which country are you watching this? It's wonderful to have such a global community learning together about the diverse ways people live across our planet. Thank you for being here and for your curiosity about the world. Now, let's continue discovering what makes Kabul truly extraordinary. The capital sits at an elevation of 1,790 meters above sea level, cradled by mountains that can receive snow even in late spring. During winter, temperatures can plummet to 15 degrees Celsius, while summer days might reach 35 degrees Celsius, creating stark seasonal contrasts that shape daily life. This high-altitude location has historically made Kabul a strategic prize, controlling ancient trade routes between east and west. The city's position along the Kabul River has provided water and fertile soil for agriculture, supporting human settlement since the Achaemenid Empire around 500 BCE. Walking through Kabul today means walking through layers of history where Greco-Bactrian coins might still be found in old bazaars, where Mughal gardens whisper of past glories, and where every neighborhood tells a different chapter of this ongoing story. What secrets do these ancient streets hold? What will we uncover as we explore deeper into the customs and daily rhythms that define life here? The answers await us in the blocks ahead, where we'll peel back the layers of one of humanity's oldest continuously inhabited cities. Afghanistan, officially the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, occupies a crucial position in Central Asia, bordered by Pakistan to the east and south, Iran to the west, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, and Tajikistan to the north, and China's Xinjiang province to the northeast. This landlocked nation spans approximately 652,230 square kilometers, making it roughly the size of Texas or slightly smaller than the state of New South Wales in Australia. For comparison, it's about twice the size of Germany. The country's population reached approximately 41 million people in 2024, though exact figures remain estimates due to decades without a comprehensive census. This gives Afghanistan a population density of around 63 people per square kilometer, though this distribution is highly uneven, with major cities holding concentrations far above rural areas. Kabul, the capital and largest city, serves as the political, economic, and cultural heart of the nation. Current estimates place Kabul's population between 4.5 and 5 million residents, though this number fluctuates based on security situations and economic opportunities. The city sprawls across approximately 1,028 square kilometers of the Kabul Valley, surrounded by the Hindu Kush Mountains that form a dramatic backdrop to daily life. Beyond Kabul, other major urban centers include Kandahar in the south, with roughly 600,000 residents, known as the spiritual birthplace of the Taliban movement; Herat in the west, near the Iranian border with around 550,000 people, famous for its Persian cultural influences; Mazar-e Sharif in the north with about 500,000 inhabitants, home to the stunning Blue Mosque; and Jalalabad in the east with approximately 350,000 residents, situated in a warmer, more subtropical climate than most of the country. Afghanistan's geography is dominated by mountains, with the Hindu Kush Range cutting through the center of the country like a spine. The highest peak, Noshak, reaches 7,392 meters along the border with Pakistan. This mountainous terrain means that only about 12% of the land is arable, yet these fertile valleys and plains have supported civilizations for thousands of years. The climate varies dramatically by region and elevation. The capital experiences cold winters where temperatures regularly drop below freezing and snow blankets the city for weeks, while summers bring dry heat that can exceed 35 degrees Celsius. In contrast, Jalalabad, at a lower elevation, experiences subtropical conditions with temperatures reaching 45 degrees Celsius in summer. The northern plains have a more continental climate, while the southwestern deserts, including parts of Helmand and Nimroz provinces, experience some of the harshest heat in the region, with summer temperatures occasionally touching 50 degrees Celsius. The name Afghanistan derives from Afghan, the Persian name for the Pashtun people, who form the country's largest ethnic group, combined with the suffix stan, meaning place of or land of. Thus, Afghanistan literally translates to land of the Afghans. The term Afghan historically referred specifically to Pashtuns, though today it encompasses all citizens of the nation. This etymology reflects the Pashtuns' historical dominance in the region, though the country's actual ethnic composition is far more diverse, including significant Tajik, Hazara, Uzbek, Turkmen, and other populations. Understanding Afghanistan's present requires grasping its tumultuous past, for history weighs heavily on every aspect of modern Afghan life, particularly in Kabul. The region has been conquered and influenced by an astounding array of empires and cultures: the Achaemenid Persians, Alexander the Great's Macedonian army, the Mauryan Empire of India, the Greco-Bactrian Kingdom, the Kushans, the Sassanid Persians, the Islamic conquest in the 7th century, the Mongol devastation under Genghis Khan, the Timurid Renaissance, the Mughal Empire, and the Durrani Empire, founded in 1747 by Ahmad Shah Durrani, who is considered the founder of modern Afghanistan. This succession of rulers left layers of cultural influence that persist today in language, architecture, art, and custom. The 19th and early 20th centuries saw Afghanistan become a buffer state in the Great Game between the British and Russian empires. Afghanistan successfully maintained independence, though not without conflict. The First Anglo-Afghan War, 1839 to 1842, ended in disaster for the British, with the famous retreat from Kabul in 1842 resulting in the death of approximately 16,500 British and Indian soldiers and camp followers. The Second Anglo-Afghan War, 1878-1880, resulted in British control over Afghan foreign affairs, a situation that persisted until King Amanullah Khan declared full independence in 1919 following the Third Anglo-Afghan War. Amanullah initiated ambitious modernization reforms in the 1920s, including education for girls, which ultimately led to his overthrow by conservative opposition. The second half of the 20th century brought modernization under King Zahir Shah, 1933-1973, often remembered as a golden age when Kabul was known as the Paris of Central Asia, with women attending universities unveiled and international tourists visiting freely. This ended with a coup in 1973, followed by a communist takeover in 1978, which triggered the Soviet invasion in 1979. The subsequent Soviet-Afghan War, 1979 to 1989, devastated the country, killed over 1 million Afghans, and created millions of refugees. The Soviet withdrawal led not to peace, but to civil war among competing Mujahideen factions, culminating in the rise of the Taliban in 1996. The Taliban's first regime, 1996-2001, imposed strict interpretation of Islamic law before being overthrown by U.S.-led forces following the September 11, 2001 attacks. 20 years of international presence followed before the Taliban's return to power in August 2021. This complex history has profoundly shaped Kabul's culture, particularly regarding women's roles, family structures, and social customs. The back and forth between modernization and traditionalism, between foreign influence and indigenous identity, between different Islamic interpretations and secular governance, has created a society where multiple realities coexist, often in tension. How has this turbulent past influenced the customs we'll explore? What aspects of traditional culture have persisted through decades of upheaval? Understanding this historical context is essential as we now turn to the physical landscape that has shaped Afghan character and culture for millennia. To understand the people of Afghanistan, one must first understand the land that shaped them, for the dramatic geography of this nation has forged a character of resilience, independence, and awe-inspiring endurance. The landscape around Kabul offers an immediate introduction to Afghanistan's natural grandeur. The city sits in a valley surrounded by the Hindu Kush Mountains, whose snow-capped peaks rise dramatically from the urban sprawl below. On clear winter mornings, the mountains appear so close you feel you could reach out and touch them, their slopes glowing pink and orange in the sunrise before the city wakes. These aren't gentle hills, but formidable barriers reaching heights of 4,000 to 5,000 meters in the ranges immediately surrounding the capital. The Pagman Mountains to the west of Kabul once served as a summer retreat for royalty, where gardens and pavilions provided escape from the city heat. The Hindu Kush itself, whose name controversially translates from Persian as Hindu killer, supposedly referring to the harsh conditions that claimed lives of Indian slaves being transported north in ancient times, forms one of the world's great mountain ranges. Stretching approximately 800 kilometers through central Afghanistan, these peaks contain over 200 mountains exceeding 6,000 meters in elevation. The range effectively divides northern Afghanistan from the south, creating distinct climate zones and cultural regions. In winter, snowfall in these mountains can reach several meters in depth, closing passes for months and isolating communities that must rely on supplies stored through summer. The melting snow feeds Afghanistan's river systems, including the Kabul River, the Helmand River, Afghanistan's longest at 150 kilometers, and the Amu Darya, making these mountains the literal lifeblood of the nation. Bandi Amir National Park, located approximately 230 kilometers west of Kabul in Bamyan Province, presents one of Afghanistan's most stunning natural wonders. This series of 6 deep blue lakes sits at an altitude of approximately 3,000 meters, each separated by natural dams of travertine, a mineral deposit formed over thousands of years by carbon dioxide-rich water interacting with limestone. The result is a surreal landscape of brilliant turquoise and sapphire blue water, contrasting sharply with the surrounding beige and cream-colored cliffs and the deep blue sky at high altitude. The largest lake, Band-e-Haibat, stretches about 6 kilometers in length with a maximum depth of around 50 meters. The water temperature rarely exceeds 15 degrees Celsius even in summer, reflecting its glacial origins and high-altitude location. In winter, these lakes freeze solid, their surfaces becoming sheets of ice that reflect the surrounding cliffs in crystalline perfection. What makes Band-e-Amir particularly special is its geological uniqueness. It represents one of the few places on Earth where travertine dams have formed naturally on such a scale. The mineral-rich water creates ongoing deposits that slowly reshape the landscape, meaning the lakes looked slightly different a century ago and will look different a century hence. Local legend attributes the lake's creation to Hazrat Ali, the son-in-law of Prophet Muhammad, who supposedly created them miraculously. Today, despite decades of conflict, Band-e-Amir attracts Afghan tourists during summer months, with families picnicking along the shores and children splashing in the frigid shallows while maintaining the modesty codes that govern Afghan society. The Wakhan Corridor, a narrow strip of territory extending east from Afghanistan's main body toward China, represents perhaps the country's most remote and spectacular landscape. This panhandle of land, approximately 350 kilometers long but rarely more than 20 kilometers wide, was created as a buffer between Russian and British territories during the Great Game era. The Wakhan sits at the junction of the Hindu Kush, Pamir, Karakoram, and Himalayan mountain ranges, four of the world's greatest mountain systems meeting in one of Earth's most dramatic confluences. Here, peaks exceed 7,000 meters, with Noshak reaching 7,492 meters and numerous other summits approaching that height. The climate in the Wakhan is severe beyond imagination for those accustomed to temperate zone. Winter temperatures routinely drop to 30 degrees Celsius or lower, with some valleys experiencing 50 degrees Celsius during the worst cold snaps. Summer provides brief respite, with daytime temperatures reaching perhaps 20 degrees Celsius, though nights remain cold. The Waki people, an ethnic group distinct from other Afghans, inhabit this corridor, living in stone houses heated by yak dung fires, herding their animals across high-altitude pastures, and maintaining a semi-nomadic existence that has changed little in centuries. The Marco Polo sheep, named after the famous traveler who documented them, roam these heights with magnificent curved horns that can span over 1.5 meters. Snow leopards, among the world's most elusive predators, hunt these remote peaks, though fewer than 100 likely remain in Afghan territory. The contrasts in Afghanistan's geography extend to its deserts. The Registan Desert in the south, spanning parts of Helmand and Kandahar provinces, presents an utterly different world from the Hindu Kush. Here, sand dunes reaching 100 meters in height shift with the wind, creating an ever-changing landscape of russet, gold, and amber tones. Summer temperatures in the Registan regularly exceed 45 degrees Celsius, with ground temperatures reaching 60 degrees Celsius or higher, making metal objects too hot to touch with bare hands. Yet even here, life persists. Desert springs called karez, ancient underground irrigation channels, support small oases where date palms provide shade and crops grow in defiance of the harsh environment. These karez systems, some over 1,000 years old, demonstrate the ingenuity required to survive in Afghanistan's varied landscapes. How have these extreme environments shaped Afghan culture? What lessons did generations of living between towering mountains and scorching deserts teach the people who call this land home? The physical landscape has created not just geographical divisions, but cultural ones, with mountain communities developing different customs from desert peoples and valley dwellers maintaining distinct traditions from highland nomads. Yet certain characteristics unite them all. An appreciation for hospitality born from understanding how crucial mutual support is in harsh environments, a respect for endurance and resilience, and a connection to the land that runs deeper than mere geography. As we shift our focus from these magnificent natural settings to the human story at the heart of this documentary, keep in mind that the dramatic landscape we've explored isn't just backdrop, it's a fundamental force that has shaped every aspect of what we're about to discover about life in Kabul and the customs that define it. Beyond the mountains and deserts that frame Afghanistan's geography, another world exists in the river valleys and agricultural plains that have sustained civilizations for millennia. The Helmand Valley in southern Afghanistan represents one of the country's most fertile regions, where the Helmand River creates a green ribbon of life through otherwise arid terrain. Ancient irrigation systems, some dating back over 2,000 years, channel water to fields producing wheat, cotton, melons, and pomegranates. The pomegranates of Kandahar, in particular, have been celebrated for centuries, their deep red seeds bursting with sweetness that some say surpasses any other variety in the world. These fruits aren't just crops. They appear in Afghan poetry, proverbs, and cultural symbolism, representing prosperity and the sweetness of life itself. The Panjshir Valley, approximately 150 kilometers northeast of Kabul, offers yet another dramatic landscape. Panjshir means 5 lions in Persian, named after 5 spiritual brothers said to have protected the valley. This narrow gorge, carved by the rushing Panjshir River and hemmed in by mountains rising 3,000 meters on either side, has served as a natural fortress throughout history. The valley's strategic importance made it famous during the Soviet-Afghan War, where it became the stronghold of legendary commander Ahmad Shah Massoud, who successfully resisted Soviet forces through the 1980s, despite countless attempts to conquer it. Today, the valley remains predominantly Tajik in ethnicity and maintains a distinct identity within Afghanistan. In spring, apricot and almond trees bloom throughout the valley, covering the mountainsides in clouds of white and pink blossoms that contrast beautifully with the gray stone slopes and the bright blue of the river below. Afghanistan's biodiversity, though diminished by decades of conflict and habitat loss, still contains remarkable wildlife. The markhor, a wild goat with magnificently spiraled horns that can reach over 1.5 meters in length, inhabits mountainous regions and serves as Pakistan's national animal, though populations exist in Afghanistan as well. The Afghan fox, a small, pale-colored fox adapted to desert environments, hunts rodents across the southern plains. Golden eagles, masters of the sky with wingspans reaching 2-3 meters, soar above mountain valleys and have been trained for hunting by Kazakh communities in the far north of the country for generations. In the forests of eastern provinces like Nuristan and Kunar, the last remaining populations of Asiatic black bears persist, though their numbers have dwindled to perhaps fewer than 100 individuals. The Salang Pass, one of Afghanistan's most vital and notorious mountain crossings, connects Kabul to northern Afghanistan via a tunnel built by the Soviet Union in 1964. At 3,178 meters above sea level, the Salang Tunnel was once the highest tunnel in the world. The 6-kilometer passage through the Hindu Kush has witnessed countless tragedies, including a devastating 1982 incident when a fuel tanker collision created an explosion and fire that killed an estimated 176 Soviet soldiers and Afghan civilians, though some reports suggest the death toll was much higher. Even today, traveling through the Salang in winter carries risks, as avalanches, rockfalls, and extreme weather can close the pass for days or weeks. Yet this route remains essential, as it reduces the journey from Kabul to Mazar-e-Sharif from over 700 kilometers via alternative routes to approximately 420 kilometers. But as magnificent as Afghanistan's landscapes are, they serve as the stage for something even more complex and fascinating: the human culture that has evolved within them. The natural world has shaped Afghan society, but it is the people themselves, their customs, their values, and their daily lives that form the true heart of this story. And nowhere is Afghan culture more concentrated, more diverse, and more complex than in Kabul itself. The city represents a microcosm of the entire nation, where Pashtuns, Tajiks, Hazaras, Uzbeks, and other ethnic groups converge, where ancient traditions meet modern challenges, and where the full spectrum of Afghan life plays out daily in bazaars, homes, and streets. What really happens behind the compound walls that line Kabul's neighborhoods? How do families structure their lives? What customs govern interactions between men and women, between generations, between neighbors? And most intriguingly, how do Kabul's women navigate their world, maintaining identity and dignity within one of the world's most restrictive societies for female autonomy? These questions bring us to the core of our exploration, to the aspects of Afghan culture that outsiders rarely glimpse and often misunderstand. To understand life in Kabul, one must begin inside the Afghan home itself, for it is within the private sphere that the deepest cultural values express themselves most authentically. The traditional Afghan home, whether a modest mud brick house or a more substantial compound, centers around the concept of privacy and family honor. High walls, typically at least 2.5 to 3 meters tall, surround residential properties, creating enclosed worlds invisible from the street. These walls aren't merely for security. They represent a fundamental cultural principle that family life, especially the women of the household, should remain shielded from public view. The concept of mahram and namahram governs Afghan social life, dividing the world into close male relatives with whom a woman may interact freely, father, brothers, sons, uncles, husband, and all other men with whom strict protocols must be observed. Inside these compound walls, homes traditionally divide into separate spaces for men and women. The hujra, or guest room, serves as the male domain where the family receives visitors, conducts business, and entertains friends. This room, typically near the entrance of the home, allows male guests to enter without proceeding deeper into the family's private quarters. The interior rooms, particularly bedrooms and the kitchen area, constitute women's space where female family members spend most of their time. This spatial division reflects the Afghan interpretation of purda, literally curtain, the practice of gender segregation that extends beyond mere architecture into every aspect of social life. In more conservative families, even adult brothers-in-law may not freely interact with their brothers' wives, maintaining careful distance and avoiding extended eye contact as a sign of respect and propriety. The role of women within this system defies simple characterization. Western observers often see only restriction and oppression, yet many Afghan women, including educated urbanites who remember pre-Taliban freedoms, describe the system through a lens of honor, family cohesion, and religious duty. An Afghan mother in Kabul holds immense power within her household, managing finances, making decisions about children's education and marriages, and commanding respect from grown sons who seek her counsel on major life choices. The stereotype of the voiceless, powerless Afghan woman rarely reflects the complex reality of familial dynamics. However, this domestic power exists within strict boundaries. Women's mobility outside the home, their access to education and employment, and their participation in public life have varied dramatically depending on which regime controlled Afghanistan and remain severely restricted under current Taliban governance. Afghan concepts of female beauty and modesty intertwine in ways that might seem contradictory to outsiders. Within the privacy of women's gatherings, weddings, and family celebrations, where no unrelated men are present, Afghan women dress in elaborate, colorful clothing that would startle those who only see them in public, wearing all-concealing burqas or conservative hijabs. Traditional Afghan dresses, called Parahan Tunban, feature vibrant colors like emerald green, sapphire blue, ruby red, and sunset orange, often adorned with intricate embroidery in gold and silver thread. These garments might include elaborate needlework around the neckline, cuffs, and hem, with designs featuring floral patterns, geometric shapes, and stylized representations of pomegranates and other symbols. A wedding dress can take months to embroider and might cost several $100s or more, representing a significant investment for most families. Jewelry holds particular importance in Afghan culture, serving not just as adornment, but as a woman's personal wealth that remains her property even in divorce. Traditional Afghan jewelry includes elaborate headpieces with dangling coins, heavy silver necklaces with turquoise and carnelian stones, and numerous bangles that jingle with movement. In more prosperous families, gold jewelry serves as both beauty enhancement and financial investment. A bride typically receives substantial jewelry as part of her mahr, bride price, which Islamic law designates as her personal property. This jewelry represents security. In times of economic hardship, women can sell these pieces to support their families, giving them a form of economic agency within an otherwise male-controlled financial system. Yet public presentation tells a completely different story. The burqa, that all-enveloping blue garment with its distinctive mesh face covering, became internationally synonymous with Afghanistan during the Taliban's first regime. While burqa use declined significantly in urban areas like Kabul between 2001 and 2021, with many women choosing headscarves and long coats instead, the garment never disappeared completely and has become more prevalent again since the Taliban's return to power. The burqa provides complete anonymity in public, reducing women to uniform shapes moving through the streets. Some women describe feeling protected by this anonymity, particularly in crowded bazaars where the burqa shields them from unwanted attention. Others describe claustrophobia, limited vision. The mesh eyepiece restricts peripheral vision significantly, and the challenge of navigating uneven streets, stairs, or traffic while one's entire field of view is compromised. The daily rhythm of a woman's life in Kabul varies dramatically based on family circumstances, economic status, and the current political climate's enforcement of restrictions. Before dawn, women wake to prepare breakfast, often bread baked in traditional tandoor ovens or purchased fresh from neighborhood bakeries. The labor involved in Afghan cooking remains substantial, with many dishes requiring hours of preparation. A housewife might spend her morning cleaning, washing clothes, often by hand as many households lack washing machines, and preparing ingredients for lunch, the main meal of the day. In families allowing it, women might venture out for shopping, always accompanied by a male relative, a mahram, as current restrictions mandate, their movements limited to necessary errands rather than leisure. Educated women in Kabul lived remarkably different lives during the 2001-2021 period, attending universities, working in offices, NGOs, and government positions, and moving through the city with relative freedom compared to their mother's generation. Female doctors, teachers, journalists, and business owners contributed significantly to Afghan society and economy. These gains have been largely reversed since August 2021, with women barred from university education, most employment sectors, and even public spaces like parks, unless accompanied by male guardians. The psychological impact of these restrictions on women who tasted freedom cannot be overstated. Former university students now confined to their homes describe depression, loss of purpose, and the painful experience of watching years of education become unusable. What does this mean for Afghan society's future? How do families adapt to these restrictions? And what other aspects of daily life define the Afghan experience? Marriage customs in Afghanistan reveal perhaps more about cultural values than any other social practice, for weddings represent not merely the union of two individuals, but the joining of entire families, clans, and sometimes even communities. The process begins not with romance but with family deliberation. Arranged marriages remain the overwhelming norm, with love marriages viewed with suspicion as potentially threatening family honor and social stability. When a young man reaches marriageable age, typically in his early to mid-20s, his mother begins surveying eligible young women within her social network. Female relatives might visit other households for tea, ostensibly for social calls, but actually assessing potential brides for their sons, nephews, or other male relatives. The qualities valued in a prospective bride include, first and foremost, family reputation. A young woman's beauty, education, or personal achievements matter far less than her family's standing in the community. Does her family have a good reputation? Are they known for honesty and piety? Have any scandals touched the family? Is her father respected? These questions determine her marriageability more than her individual characteristics. Physical beauty is considered, but within narrow parameters. Fair skin is prized above all else, with skin-lightening creams being popular among young women despite health risks. Modesty in behavior, demonstrated through downcast eyes, quiet speech, and appropriate dress, signals proper upbringing. Domestic skills, including cooking, sewing, and household management, are expected. Once a potential match is identified, the young man's family initiates formal contact. The father, uncles, or other senior male relatives visit the young woman's family to express interest. If the initial reception is positive, negotiations begin regarding the mahr, the bride price required by Islamic law. The mahr can range from a few $1,000s to tens of thousands in wealthier families, plus gold jewelry, clothing, and household furnishings. These negotiations can take weeks or months, with families haggling over amounts and conditions. The young woman herself may have little say in these discussions, though Islamic law technically requires her consent to the marriage. In practice, family pressure to accept a suitable match can be overwhelming, especially in conservative households where refusing a proposal might be seen as bringing shame. Engagement periods typically last from several months to over a year, during which the couple may see each other only during chaperoned family visits. Physical contact before marriage is absolutely forbidden, with even hand-holding considered scandalous. The engaged couple communicates primarily through family intermediaries, though in more liberal Kabul families, phone contact might be permitted under supervision. This period allows families to prepare for the wedding and the bride's family to assemble her trousseau, which includes clothing, bedding, kitchen items, and other household goods that she brings to her new home. Afghan weddings are elaborate, expensive affairs that can financially devastate families. A typical Kabul wedding might cost between $10,000 and $30,000, though more affluent families can spend $100,000 or more. This in a country where the average annual income is under $500 per person, making wedding expenses a crushing burden that families save for years to afford or go into debt to provide. The wedding itself unfolds over multiple days. The henna night occurs several days before the ceremony, where female relatives and friends gather to apply intricate henna designs to the bride's hands and feet. These designs, featuring floral patterns and geometric shapes, can take hours to apply and symbolize beauty, blessing, and the transition from girlhood to womanhood. The wedding day begins with the nikah, the Islamic marriage ceremony, conducted by a mullah in the presence of male witnesses from both families. The bride typically is not present at her own nikah. Instead, a male relative represents her, having obtained her consent privately beforehand. This ceremony lasts perhaps 30 minutes, involving recitation of Quranic verses and formal acceptance of the marriage contract. Following the nikah, separate celebrations occur for men and women. The men's gathering features dinner, music, and speeches in a wedding hall or large private space. Meanwhile, the women's celebration, held in a completely separate venue to ensure no unrelated men can see the female guests, becomes a colorful spectacle of music, dancing, and elaborate dresses that Westerners rarely glimpse. At women's weddings, guests wear their finest clothes and jewelry, transforming into displays of color and sparkle that contrast sharply with the modesty required in public. Professional wedding halls in Kabul feature stages where the bride sits on a decorated throne-like chair, wearing a white wedding dress, a relatively modern adoption influenced by Western culture, often adorned with crystals and excessive embellishment. Female guests approach to congratulate her, have photos taken together, and present gifts. Later in the evening, the bride changes into traditional Afghan dress, showcasing the elaborate embroidery that represents her family's investment. Musicians, always female at women's gatherings, play traditional instruments and sing, while guests dance in styles ranging from traditional Afghan steps to modern moves influenced by Bollywood or Western pop culture. The moment of maximum tension comes when the groom arrives to collect his bride. He enters the women's gathering briefly, surrounded by female relatives who create a protective barrier, ensuring his gaze falls only on his new wife. The bride, often visibly nervous or even crying, is led out to a decorated car for the journey to her new home. Her tears aren't necessarily from sadness. Rather, they represent the profound transition she's experiencing. She's leaving her childhood home, her parents, her siblings, and entering an unknown life in a household dominated by her mother-in-law and husband's family. For many young brides, Marriage means moving from a known environment where she had some freedom as a daughter to a new home, where she occupies the lowest status as the newest daughter-in-law. Life for a newly married woman in Afghanistan follows patterns that have remained remarkably consistent for generations. She moves into her husband's family home, where she typically shares space with his parents, unmarried siblings, and possibly other married brothers with their families. Multi-generational households remain the norm, with 3 or even 4 generations living under one roof. The new bride falls under her mother-in-law's authority, taking on the heaviest household tasks. Washing dishes, doing laundry, cleaning, and assisting with cooking under her mother-in-law's supervision. Her relationship with her husband develops gradually and privately. Public displays of affection between married couples are considered improper. The husband may advocate for his wife with his mother, but open contradiction of parental authority remains rare. A woman's status in the household increases significantly with the birth of her first child, particularly if it's a son, gradually earning her more respect and autonomy within the family structure. The most profound and perhaps most misunderstood aspect of women's lives in Kabul lies in how they navigate the intersection of family honor, religious interpretation, and personal identity within a system that many outsiders view as purely oppressive. Yet the reality contains layers of complexity that resist simple narratives. Afghan women's agency expresses itself in ways that don't always align with Western feminist frameworks, and understanding this requires stepping outside our own cultural assumptions to see the world through Afghan eyes. Within the strict confines of gender segregation, Afghan women have created entire parallel worlds invisible to men and to outside observers. Women's social networks form elaborate webs of connection, information exchange, and mutual support that operate completely separately from male social structures. When women visit each other's homes for afternoon tea gatherings called Mehmani, they're not merely socializing, they're conducting crucial social business. These gatherings serve multiple functions. They're where mothers identify potential brides for their sons, where information about families' reputations circulates, where women discuss problems and seek advice, where business transactions sometimes occur, women selling embroidered goods, jewelry, or cosmetics to other women, and where political opinions and news are discussed with surprising frankness. The conversations that occur in these women-only spaces can be remarkably candid, with criticisms of government, social conditions, and even their own husbands expressed in ways that would be impossible in mixed company. The concept of namus, or family honor, centers particularly on women's sexual propriety, creating immense pressure but also, paradoxically, a form of power. Because family honor depends so heavily on women's behavior, women's compliance or non-compliance with social norms becomes leverage. A daughter who threatens to bring shame through inappropriate behavior wields tremendous negative power that families will go to great lengths to prevent. Conversely, women who meticulously uphold family honor accumulate respect and moral authority within their communities. An older woman known for piety, proper behavior, and raising honorable children commands respect that transcends gender limitations in certain contexts. Such women may be consulted on important family decisions, serve as mediators in disputes, and exercise influence that, while still operating within patriarchal structures, is nonetheless real and significant. Education for girls represents one of the most contentious and fluctuating aspects of Afghan women's lives. During the 1960s and 1970s, Kabul University educated thousands of young women who went on to become teachers, doctors, and government employees. Photos from this era show female students in Western-style clothing on university campuses, a sight that seems almost unbelievable to those who only know post-1990s Afghanistan. The communist government, 1978-1992, actually promoted women's education and employment aggressively, making literacy classes mandatory and recruiting women into government positions. However, this forced modernization alienated rural and conservative populations, contributing to the resistance that eventually overthrew the communist government. The Civil War period, 1992-1996, saw different Mujahideen factions controlling various parts of Kabul with wildly different policies regarding women. Some areas maintained relative normalcy with women working and studying, while others imposed strict restrictions. The Taliban's first regime, 1996-2001, banned girls' education entirely beyond age 8 and prohibited women from working except in very limited healthcare roles, serving female patients. The rationale provided was that education and work placed women in contact with unrelated men, violating Islamic propriety, and that women's primary role was domestic. In practice, this meant that an entire generation of girls received little or no formal education, and countless professional women lost their livelihoods overnight. The period from 2001 to 2021 saw dramatic expansion of educational opportunities. By 2020, approximately 3.5 million girls attended school in Afghanistan, including over 100,000 at university level. In Kabul specifically, roughly 40% of students at public universities were female, studying subjects ranging from medicine and engineering to literature and journalism. Young women who came of age during this period had fundamentally different expectations than their mother's generation. They envisioned careers, delayed marriage, and participation in public life in ways their grandmothers could never have imagined. Female teachers, police officers, members of parliament, and business owners became increasingly common sights in Kabul, though always operating within certain cultural constraints and facing opposition from conservative elements. Since August 2021, these gains have been systematically dismantled. Girls have been barred from education beyond 6th grade, and women have been prohibited from attending universities, working in most sectors, and accessing public spaces like parks and gyms. The Taliban's position is that these restrictions are temporary until Islamic conditions can be established, though no timeline or specific conditions have been articulated. The psychological and economic impact has been devastating. Female teachers comprise a large portion of Afghanistan's educational workforce. Their unemployment has contributed to the collapse of much of the educational system. Female healthcare workers are similarly critical, as many women will not accept treatment from male doctors. The restriction of women to their homes has created a silent crisis of mental health, with depression, anxiety, and even suicide attempts increasing dramatically among previously active educated women. What do you think about this complex reality where some women find meaning within traditional structures while others feel imprisoned by them? Could you adapt to a society where your gender determined your education, employment, and freedom of movement so absolutely? What surprises you most about how Afghan women navigate their world? Please pause the video and leave a comment sharing your thoughts. It's the best way to support this channel, and I genuinely love reading your perspectives and engaging with different viewpoints. Take a moment to read other comments too. You'll find fascinating perspectives from people around the world. Thank you so much for your support and for being part of this global community learning together. Now, let's continue discovering more remarkable aspects of Afghan culture and life in Kabul. The education restrictions have created an underground resistance in the form of secret schools. Throughout Kabul and other cities, networks of educated women have established clandestine classes in private homes where girls continue learning in secret. These schools operate in constant fear of discovery, as Taliban authorities have raided and closed such schools when discovered, arresting the teachers. Yet they persist, teaching mathematics, science, languages, and literature to girls whose families are determined that their daughters will not lose educational opportunities entirely. These secret schools represent extraordinary courage, as the teachers and the families enrolling their daughters risk serious consequences, including arrest, public humiliation, and even physical punishment. Moving beyond the gender dynamics that dominate outsiders' perceptions of Afghanistan, the country's broader cultural landscape reveals richness that often goes unnoticed. Afghan hospitality represents one of the culture's most defining characteristics. Expressed in the Pashtunwali Code, the traditional Pashtun ethical system, as Mel Mastia, the obligation to provide hospitality to all visitors regardless of personal cost or even personal danger. This isn't mere politeness, it's a sacred duty with roots stretching back millennia. An Afghan host will serve the best food available to guests, even if this means the family eats less later. Refusing hospitality or failing to provide it brings profound shame. Stories abound of families selling possessions to properly host important guests, and of poor families serving their last reserves of food to ensure visitors are well fed. The ritual of tea drinking forms the centerpiece of Afghan social interaction. Green tea, called chai sabz, is the most common variety, served without milk and often flavored with cardamom. The tea is typically quite sweet, with several teaspoons of sugar added and served in small handleless cups called piala. Refusing tea when offered is considered rude. The proper protocol is to accept at least one cup, drink it, or at least appear to, and then place your hand over the cup when more is offered to politely decline. Business negotiations, social visits, and even chance encounters with acquaintances can involve extended tea drinking, with the beverage serving as social lubricant facilitating conversation and relationship building. Afghan cuisine deserves recognition as one of Central Asia's most sophisticated and flavorful food traditions, blending influences from Persia, India, and Central Asian nomadic cultures. The national dish, Qabuli Palaw, consists of steamed rice cooked with lamb, raisins, carrots, and almonds, flavored with cumin, cardamom, and black pepper. The preparation requires skill, as the rice must be tender but separate, not mushy, and the lamb perfectly cooked until it falls from the bone. A well-prepared Qabuli Palaw displays layers of color and texture, white rice forming the base, golden carrots creating a sweet contrast, dark raisins providing bursts of concentrated sweetness, and tender lamb pieces distributed throughout. Families serve this at special occasions, with the cook's reputation partly dependent on their ability to prepare excellent Qabuli Palaw. Kebabs in Afghanistan transcend the simple grilled meat familiar in Western fast food. Afghan kebabs, called Seekh Kebab, consist of minced lamb mixed with onions, garlic, coriander, and spices, formed around flat metal skewers and grilled over charcoal. The meat must be fatty enough to stay moist during cooking, but lean enough not to drip excessively, requiring careful meat selection and preparation. Served with warm naan bread straight from the tandoor oven, raw onions, fresh tomatoes, and a yogurt sauce, kebabs constitute a complete meal. Street vendors throughout Kabul sell kebabs from small stalls where smoke from charcoal grills perfumes entire neighborhoods, particularly in the evening when workers heading home stop for dinner. Mantu, Afghan dumplings, represent one of the cuisine's most labor-intensive dishes, typically prepared for special occasions when women gather to make hundreds of dumplings together. The dough is rolled paper-thin, cut into squares, filled with spiced ground meat and onions, then folded into distinctive shapes and steamed. Once cooked, mantu are topped with a meat and split pea sauce, yogurt, and dried mint, creating layers of complementary flavors and textures. The dish likely arrived in Afghanistan via the Mongol invasion, as similar dumplings appear throughout the former Mongol Empire, but Afghans have made it distinctly their own with the specific spicing and sauce combination. Sweets play important roles in Afghan celebrations and hospitality. Jalebi, deep-fried batter formed into pretzel-like shapes and soaked in sugar syrup, appears at weddings and festivals. Halwa, a dense sweet made from flour, oil, and sugar, comes in multiple varieties, including one studded with almonds and another flavored with cardamom. During Nowruz, Persian New Year, celebrated around March 21st, families prepare haft mewa, a sweet mixture of 7 dried fruits and nuts soaked in water, symbolizing the renewal of nature and the arrival of spring. Shops specializing in sweets line Kabul's bazaars, their windows displaying pyramids of colorful confections that attract children's longing gazes and adults' indulgent purchases for family celebrations. Nowruz itself represents Afghanistan's most joyful celebration, transcending ethnic and religious divisions to unite Afghans in welcoming spring. The holiday, which predates Islam and has roots in ancient Persian Zoroastrian tradition, marks the spring equinox when day and night are equal length. Families clean their homes thoroughly, purchase new clothes if they can afford them, and prepare special foods. In Mazar-e-Sharif, tens of thousands gather at the Blue Mosque for celebrations featuring music, dancing, and the raising of a special ceremonial flag. In Kabul, families visit parks and picnic areas once weather permits, spreading carpets on the ground for outdoor meals and enjoying the brief period when the city's landscape transforms with budding trees and emerging flowers. Afghan music occupies a complex position in the culture, beloved by many but viewed with suspicion or outright hostility by religious conservatives. Traditional Afghan music features instruments like the rubab, a short-necked lute considered Afghanistan's national instrument with a distinctive resonant sound created by its skin-covered soundboard. The tabla, paired drums played with the hands, provide rhythm, while the harmonium, a small reed organ introduced during British colonial influence in the region, supplies melodic accompaniment. Afghan classical music, heavily influenced by Indian ragas and Persian daska systems, features elaborate improvisations and complex rhythmic patterns that trained musicians study for years to master. During the Taliban's first regime, music was banned entirely except for religious chanting, with instruments destroyed and musicians forced to abandon their craft or flee the country. Between 2001 and 2021, Afghanistan's music scene experienced a renaissance, with radio stations, television programs, and live performances becoming common. Afghan pop music, heavily influenced by Indian Bollywood and Iranian pop, gained massive popularity among youth, though traditional families still viewed it as inappropriate. Since 2021, music has again been heavily restricted, though enforcement varies, with wedding celebrations sometimes still featuring music played quietly behind closed doors where authorities are unlikely to intrude. The architectural heritage of Kabul and Afghanistan, more broadly, tells the story of the civilizations that have passed through or ruled this crossroads of Asia. The Darul Aman Palace on the southwestern outskirts of Kabul stands as a monument to both ambition and tragedy. Built in the 1920s by King Amanullah Khan as part of his modernization program, this neoclassical palace with its distinctive three-story structure and grand columns was intended to house Afghanistan's parliament. The building suffered extensive damage during the Civil War of the 1990s, left as a burned-out shell that became symbolic of Afghanistan's destruction. Recent restoration efforts have attempted to repair the damage, though the palace remains more monument than functional building, its restored facade a testament to the country's repeated cycles of progress and destruction. The Gardens of Babur, located on a hillside in central Kabul, provide a rare green space in the dusty city and commemorate Zahiruddin Muhammad Babur, the first Mughal emperor who founded the Mughal dynasty in India, but chose to be buried in Kabul, his favorite city. These gardens, originally laid out in the early 16th century, feature terraced levels with water channels, reflecting pools and fruit trees arranged in the Persian char bagh, four-garden style. Babur's tomb sits in an elegant white marble pavilion, simple yet dignified. Kabul families visit these gardens for picnics and relaxation when authorities permit mixed-gender public gatherings, finding respite from the crowded city streets among the mulberry and apricot trees that provide shade during the scorching summer months. The National Museum of Afghanistan in Kabul houses treasures spanning over 5,000 years of history, though the collection has been significantly diminished by looting, deliberate destruction, and smuggling during decades of conflict. The museum once contained one of Asia's finest collections of Buddhist art, including statues and artifacts from the Greco-Bactrian period, when Alexander the Great's successors ruled the region. During the Taliban's first regime, many statues were destroyed as un-Islamic idols, including two monumental Buddha statues carved into a cliff face in Bamiyan that dated to the 6th century and stood 55 and 38 meters tall. The destruction of the Bamiyan Buddhas in March 2001, carried out with dynamite and artillery despite international pleas for preservation, shocked the world and highlighted the Taliban's interpretation of Islamic law as incompatible with pre-Islamic cultural heritage. Yet somehow, Approximately 70% of the museum's collection survived, including the spectacular Bactrian gold, a collection of over 20,000 gold ornaments and coins dating from around 100 BCE, discovered in northern Afghanistan in 1978. During the Civil War and Taliban period, brave museum staff hid the Bactrian gold in a vault in the presidential palace, refusing to reveal its location even under pressure, preserving these irreplaceable artifacts for future generations. The collection includes intricate gold clasps, belt buckles, and crown ornaments featuring dragons, mythological creatures, and geometric patterns that demonstrate the artistic sophistication of ancient Central Asian cultures. Kabul's bazaars represent the city's economic and social heart, where commerce, gossip, and daily life converge in controlled chaos. The Mandawi Bazaar near the Kabul River sells everything from clothing and fabrics to household goods and electronics. Narrow alleys overflow with shops no bigger than closets, their goods spilling onto the walkways, forcing shoppers to navigate carefully around displays of plastic containers, aluminum pots, and stacks of imported Chinese consumer goods. The air fills with the calls of vendors advertising their wares, the smell of kebabs grilling at food stalls, and the diesel exhaust from the constant traffic of vehicles and hand carts. Women shop in the bazaar accompanied by male relatives, their burqas creating a sea of blue moving through the colorful displays of merchandise. The bird market, called Ka Farushi in Dari, occupies several streets near Puli Kishti Mosque and has operated for centuries. Here, dealers sell finches, canaries, pigeons, parrots, and songbirds in small wooden cages stacked in precarious towers. Afghan men, particularly from older generations, keep songbirds as a hobby, breeding them for their voices and appearance, entering them in informal competitions, and simply enjoying their songs. The practice connects to Persian and Central Asian traditions, where poetry, gardens, and songbirds represented refined civilization. Visiting the bird market on a Friday morning reveals dozens of men examining birds, discussing bloodlines and singing qualities with the seriousness of experts evaluating fine art. Poetry occupies a revered position in Afghan culture, with classical Persian poets like Rumi, Hafez, and Sadi widely read and quoted. Many Afghans can recite poetry from memory, incorporating verses into conversations to illustrate points or express emotions. During gatherings, someone might spontaneously recite poetry, and others may join in, creating a kind of poetic dialogue. Afghanistan has also produced its own notable poets, including Kushal Khan Khattak, 1613-1689, a Pashtun warrior poet whose verses combine martial themes with spiritual reflection, and Rahman Baba, 1632-1706, a Sufi poet whose verses about divine love and mystical experience remain enormously popular. Poetry readings called Mushaira occurred regularly in Kabul's cultural centers between 2001 and 2021, though such gatherings have become rare under current restrictions. The practice of keeping falcons and hunting birds, while less common than historically, persists among some Afghan men as a link to nomadic heritage. Falconry requires significant time investment, as birds must be trained carefully, fed specific diets, and exercised regularly. The relationship between falconer and bird is intensely personal, with the bird responding only to its trainer's voice and commands. Hunting expeditions into the countryside surrounding Kabul, where falcons hunt rabbits and game birds, provide opportunities for men to escape urban constraints and engage with traditions that connect them to their ancestors. For those considering visiting Afghanistan, particularly Kabul, the practical realities require careful consideration and honest assessment. Currently, tourism infrastructure has essentially collapsed, with very few international visitors entering the country except for humanitarian workers, journalists, and diplomats. However, understanding the logistics provides context for the challenges facing this nation and offers information for a potential future when conditions might improve. Reaching Afghanistan typically requires flying into Hamid Karzai International Airport in Kabul, the country's primary international gateway. As of 2026, only a handful of airlines operate regular flights to Kabul, primarily from regional countries. Kam Air and Ariana Afghan Airlines, Afghanistan's main carriers, offer limited international routes connecting Kabul to cities like Dubai, Istanbul, Delhi, and Tehran. Turkish Airlines and Pakistan International Airlines occasionally run flights depending on security conditions and diplomatic relations. Flight availability fluctuates based on political situations, and schedules often change with little notice. A typical flight from Dubai to Kabul takes approximately 2.5 hours, while routes from Istanbul take around 5 hours. Ticket prices vary dramatically, but generally range from $400 to $800 for economy class on available routes. Visa requirements for Afghanistan depend on nationality, though as of 2026, virtually all foreign nationals require visas obtained in advance from Afghan embassies or consulates abroad. The process can take weeks and requires letters of invitation or detailed justification for travel. Tourist visas are rarely issued given the current security situation. Business visas require sponsorship from Afghan companies or organizations. Passports must be valid for at least 6 months beyond the intended stay. It's crucial to check with your country's foreign ministry or State Department, as most Western governments currently advise against all travel to Afghanistan due to security concerns, including terrorism, kidnapping, armed conflict, and civil unrest. Afghanistan's currency, the Afghani, IAFN, has experienced significant volatility, particularly since the current regime took power. As of early 2026, the exchange rate fluctuates around 70-75 Afghanis to $1, though rates vary between official and black market exchanges. US dollars are widely accepted in Kabul, particularly in hotels and larger businesses, and often preferred for significant transactions. Credit cards are rarely accepted outside of a few establishments catering to international organizations. Banking infrastructure remains fragile, with cash being the primary medium of exchange. Travelers must bring sufficient US dollars in cash, as ATMs are unreliable and international wire transfers face significant restrictions due to sanctions and banking system limitations. A meal at a modest restaurant might cost 100-200 Afghanis, approximately $132.60, while accommodation, if available, could range from $30 to $100 or more per night in establishments meeting basic international standards. Security constitutes the most significant concern for any potential visitor. Kabul, while somewhat safer than many rural provinces, still experiences periodic attacks including bombings, armed assaults, and targeted killings. The security situation fluctuates unpredictably, with periods of relative calm interrupted by sudden violence. Foreign nationals face particular risks, including kidnapping for ransom, being caught in attacks targeting Afghan government or international facilities, and arbitrary detention. Certain areas of the city are more secure than others, with the central districts and areas near diplomatic facilities typically having more security presence, though this also makes them potential targets. Travel outside Kabul requires even more careful consideration, as many provinces experience active conflict, Taliban checkpoints, and criminal activity. For those who do travel to Afghanistan under specific circumstances such as humanitarian work, security protocols are essential. This includes traveling with experienced local guides who understand current conditions, using armored vehicles for transportation when possible, maintaining low profiles and avoiding predictable patterns, registering with your embassy or consulate, maintaining emergency communication equipment, and following guidance from security professionals. Never travel alone, never display wealth or expensive equipment openly, and always have evacuation plans prepared. Transportation within Kabul presents its own challenges. The city's public transportation consists mainly of shared minibuses called Saracha that follow fixed routes, charging passengers 10-20 Afghanis per ride. These vehicles are extremely crowded and not recommended for foreign visitors due to security concerns and the difficulty of navigating routes without local knowledge. Taxis are available and can be hired for specific trips or for entire days. Rates are negotiable, with a typical cross-city taxi ride costing 100-300 Afghanis 134. However, using unmarked taxis carries risks, and visitors should only use vehicles arranged through trusted local contacts. Rental cars are theoretically available through some hotels or travel agencies, but driving independently in Kabul is not advisable for foreign visitors unfamiliar with local traffic conditions, which are chaotic and essentially follow might makes right principles rather than formal rules. Visiting cultural sites in Kabul when security permits requires sensitivity to current restrictions and cultural expectations. Babur's Gardens, the National Museum, and historical monuments can be extraordinarily interesting, but visitors must dress extremely conservatively. Men should wear long pants and shirts with sleeves, avoiding any clothing with potentially offensive logos or messages. Women face significantly more restrictions. A headscarf covering all hair is absolutely mandatory, and many choose to wear full burqas to avoid drawing attention. Loose-fitting clothing that covers the entire body, including arms and legs, is essential. Photography is problematic, as taking pictures of government buildings, military installations, or security forces is prohibited and can result in arrest. Even photographing ordinary street scenes can attract unwanted attention, and photographing women without permission is deeply offensive and potentially dangerous. For those interested in experiencing Afghan culture respectfully, should conditions ever improve to allow tourism, working with established travel agencies specializing in Afghanistan, though few currently operate, would be essential. These agencies can arrange meetings with local families, visits to cultural sites with proper permissions, and provide security arrangements that independent travelers cannot access. Learning basic phrases in Dari, the Afghan dialect of Persian, or Pashto demonstrates respect and facilitates positive interactions. Understanding and respecting local customs, particularly regarding gender segregation, religious sensitivity, and hospitality protocols, is not just polite, but essential for safety and positive experiences. As we conclude this journey through Kabul and Afghan culture, we've explored